Hey everybody. Hey, this is Trisha coming at you. I wanted to share with you something that I read in a book that I'm currently reading for one of the Beachbody trainings that I'm going through. The book is called The Slight Edge, and it's by Jeff Olson. This book is pretty amazing. I've actually had it for about 2 years, so I'm ashamed to say that I have not started reading it until now. I wish that I had read it a long time ago, because it really sheds a lot of light on how small improvements daily or over a period of time, just small little consistent improvements can make a big difference in your life. And also those small little things that you're doing in your life that maybe aren't so great can make a big difference in your life in the opposite direction. The part that I wanted to share with you today is talks about what I learned from funerals, and it relates to the fear of rejection that I think a lot of us have. I think a lot of us go around, I know I did, still do, go around worrying about what other people think, worrying about what people are going to think about us, about the things that we do, worried about the fear of rejection. People that are in this helping business that I am in sometimes get caught up in not wanting to offer an opportunity to someone because they're afraid that that person might think ill of them, or what is that person going to think of me if I offer this? And I continually try to teach the people who are on my team that the thought process needs to be, what if they are interested? What if I can be the person that helps them change their life? And so I am constantly encouraging the people on our team, and also I have to do it for myself as well, to get out there and put the opportunity out there. If it's not right for somebody, that's okay. And those people probably are not going to be upset with you for offering it to them. They may actually be upset with you for not offering it to them when they see how successful you are with it. So anyway, no matter where it is in your life, I'm sure there's some things maybe that you have a fear of, especially when it comes to what people think, fears of rejections and things like that. And I want you to think about that and what it's keeping you from in your life, where it's keeping you from, as I read this. So what I learned from funerals. At one point in my life, when I entered the corporate world and went to work for Texas Instruments, I was all ready to work my way up in management, but life had other plans for me. I showed up for work and they put me in sales. I was horrified. I didn't want to be a salesperson. I hated sales. I didn't think I could do it. I knew I couldn't do it. What I had was not a fear of rejection. It was a terror of rejection. I knew what I would do. I would quit my job and I would go back to graduate school. But successful people do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. I was up against a wall. I had to do it, and I knew it. For my first sales call, I pored over the customer files and found the tiniest, most insignificant account I could, a tiny little drugstore in Gainesville, Florida. I figured that if I was going to make a mess, I might as well do as little damage as possible. I drove for 2.5 hours to arrive at that store, white-knuckled with fear. I parked and sat in the lot for a good half hour, leaning my face into the air conditioner vents with the AC turned up full blast and sweating buckets. I was terrified. Staying in that car would have been the easiest thing in the world to do right then. And on some level, even though I had not yet articulated the slight edge philosophy in my life, I knew that simple little errors compounded over time would rob me of all of my dreams. As I had prepared myself to go on this first sales call, I had been literally praying for help. And as so often happens when you ask for a question in all sincerity, or you ask a question in all sincerity, an answer came. In this case, it came in the form of an article I had happened to read in a magazine. The article was about funerals, and it informed me that the average funeral, about 10 people cry. I couldn't believe it. 10 people? That's it? You mean I go through my entire life, spend years and years going through all these trials and tribulations and achievements and joys and heartbreaks, and at the end of it, there are only 10 people who care enough to cry? I went on to the next paragraph, and it got worse. Once those 10 people or fewer had yanked their hankies out and honked their noses and my funeral was over, the number one factor that would determine how many people would go from the funeral to attend the actual burial would be the weather. The weather? If it happened to be raining, it said that 50% of the people who attended my funeral would decide not to go to my burial after all. I really couldn't believe it. You mean I'm lying here at the grand conclusion of everything I've ever said and done, of everything I call my life, in those final moments when my entire life is called to account and acknowledged and memorialized by those nearest and dearest to me, those whose lives I've most deeply and profoundly touched, and half of the congregation checks out halfway through because of the weather? At first, this really bummed me out, and then it was liberating. You know what? I thought, I don't give a damn what anybody thinks of what I'm doing anymore. If the odds are iffy as to whether or not they even cry at my funeral, and chances are 50-50 as to whether or not they duck out before I'm planted, if the sky happens to cry for me more than the people do, then why am I spending so much time worrying about what they're thinking now? Why would I be afraid of rejection? Why would I be concerned about what the majority thinks? Why would I be worried about what the 95% say, think, or do? Facing some truths about one's own death can also bring one face to face with some important truths about one's life. Reading that article enlarged my comfort zone and gave me an edge of courage, just a tiny edge, but an edge that I hadn't had before, a slight edge. I finally mustered what courage I could, turned off the car, went inside, and gave what I'm convinced to this day is the worst presentation in the history of sales. They did not buy a thing. In that sense, it was a total failure. But when I got back in my car, I was elated. I had blown the sales call and had achieved a victory in my life. A few days later, I happened to be thinking about that article as I sat in my car, stopped in traffic. Just then, I saw why we were all stopped. A funeral procession went by. It took less than a minute because it contained only a few cars. As traffic slowly started moving again, I thought that person lived his or her entire life worrying about what other people thought. And it suddenly hit me. Who has long funeral processions? At whose funerals do thousands cry? For whom do the millions mourn? For those who will do what others are not willing to do. For those people whom we erect statues. Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Lincoln. Gigantic funerals are held, and great crowds, sometimes entire nations, mourn for those people who spent their lives not worrying about what other people thought. And so I took away from that and I thought, oh my gosh, that's so amazing, because if you think about those people that he mentioned, those people had a vision of changing the world. They had something that they wanted to get out there. And even though they probably feared going through that process, they did it anyway. And they made a big difference and they changed the world. And I believe personally that, you know, from those people that are watching this that are Beachbody coaches, I know that we have something that can change the world one person at a time. And that starts with you. And so anybody who's out there listening, whether you're a Beachbody coach or not, go after what it is that you want in this world. Don't worry about what other people think. Get over the fear. It's always going to be there. It gets easier and easier as you go and you start sharing the amazing gifts that you have to offer the world. But just get out there and do it. I promise you won't be sorry about it. So I hope you guys are having a great day, and I hope that you got something out of this. Talk to you soon.